Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you all enjoyed the morning panels and are energized for the second half of the day. My name is Alicia Artessa, and I am the newly appointed director of the New York Offshore Wind Alliance. For those of you that do not know, NIOA is a project of ACE New York and is a diverse coalition of environmental organizations and offshore wind developers with the shared interest in promoting the responsible development of offshore wind power for New York. Our mission is to ensure the timely and responsible development of offshore wind in the Atlantic Ocean off the coast of New York State at a level necessary to contribute to the state's mandate for a 100% emissions-free grid by 2040. We strategically advocate for cutting-edge policies that achieve offshore wind power development while protecting coastal and marine ecosystems. We also strive to create in-state, quality, family-sustaining jobs and reinvestment in New York's frontline communities. Luckily, we have strong partners in the clean energy industry, like our NIOA Steering Committee member, Equinor Renewables, who are sponsors of this year's fall conference, and here is a word from Equinor.
As the wind blows across the Atlantic, it carries with it the potential to power New York, the power to propel Empire Wind's turbines and deliver reliable, renewable energy to hundreds of thousands of New Yorkers, the power to create more than 1,000 union jobs, and to transform a historic Brooklyn port into a state-of-the-art hub that supercharges the offshore wind industry in the Empire State. The power to create generational opportunities for the people of Brooklyn and beyond. The power to invest back into the Sunset Park community, education, innovation, a just energy transition. Empire Wind is no longer about potential. This is happening right now. With construction underway at the South Brooklyn Marine Terminal, Empire Wind's first power is now on the horizon.
Our partners are all aware of the urgent need for our clean energy future, and the only way for that to happen is for states and the federal government to work together to lead the transition. Here in New York, our Climate Act is among the most ambitious climate laws in the nation and requires New York to reduce economy-wide greenhouse gas emissions and require 100% zero emissions electricity by 2040. 70% renewable electricity by 2030, and 9,000 megawatts of offshore wind by 2035. New York has set the stage for the country in fighting climate change and making the renewable energy future our reality. Thankfully, the federal government has been working hard to make up for lost time on climate, and our next speaker has been a strong voice in Washington in support of these monumental initiatives. First, the Inflation Reduction Act is lowering energy costs for consumers and small businesses while creating good-paying jobs as America's clean energy economy and manufacturing sectors grow in a way this country has not seen for generations. Next, the historic $480 billion dedicated to the bipartisan infrastructure law has provided funding for over 60,000 projects to date and brings millions of dollars to New York to upgrade our infrastructure and benefits our communities through the advocacy of our representatives in DC. Finally, of course I have to mention, under the Biden-Harris administration, the White House set a goal of deploying 30 gigawatts of offshore wind energy by 2030 and 15 gigawatts of floating offshore wind energy by 2035. This is a huge signal to the industry that offshore wind and renewable energy are the future for our country. Having like-minded representatives in Congress ensures for the renewables industry that we rely on and invest in America and New York State. There is no better renewable energy and offshore wind proponent than our next speaker. Unlike some people you'll meet in Congress, Dan Goldman knows that climate change poses an existential threat to the planet and our future. He knows that good union jobs that the renewable energy industry creates can provide a career and stable living for many New Yorkers. He also knows why the transition to clean energy is vital to the health and stability of New York's environment and economy. Representative Goldman doesn't just know, he's committed to meeting the challenges of climate change head on through a comprehensive approach. He is ready and willing to speak up to support the clean energy industry, even when others are not so certain. He is committed to providing the industry with a clear message that doesn't back down in the face of adversity. How do I know this about him? I look at what he has already done in his first term in Congress. Representative Goldman is working to obtain federal investment for more and better public transportation, electrification, alternative energy, and supports climate resiliency efforts across New York 10. He believes that the most severe risks to peace and security will be driven by the symptoms of climate change: drought, famine, food and resource shortages, refugee crises, and other migration events, as well as severe natural disasters. To the representative, addressing climate change at home and abroad must be central to America's national security. Specifically, he has introduced the Homeland Security Climate Change Coordination Act to codify the current efforts of the Department of Homeland Security's Climate Action Group by permanently authorizing a Climate Coordinating Council. Representative Goldman is also a member of the Sustainable Energy and Environment Coalition and the newly formed Congressional Offshore Wind Caucus. The caucus pushes for policies to improve offshore wind technology, increase investment in the offshore wind workforce, and position the United States as a global leader in this industry. In July 2024, Representative Goldman celebrated the House's passage of the Bipartisan Water Resources Development Act, which includes key funding and policies to improve New York's climate resiliency efforts. Representative Goldman successfully secured language in the bill that mandates the United States Army Corps of Engineers perform a New York, New Jersey harbor and tributaries focus area feasibility study that addresses the variety of flooding threats faced by New York City, including tidal and river flooding, heavy rainfall, groundwater emergence, erosion, and sea level rise. This measure authorized $160 million for New York City's resiliency efforts. Finally, in April 2024, the Congressmember led a walking tour of the South Brooklyn Marine Terminal to highlight the role of the Inflation Reduction Act tax credits in transforming Brooklyn into the future offshore wind hub of America. This project will transform Brooklyn's waterfront and for the Sunset Park neighborhood. Representative Goldman has been a constant advocate for bringing economic opportunities to his district, and there has been no greater example of this than SBMT. It is my great pleasure to introduce a true friend to the renewable energy industry, Representative Dan Goldman from New York's 10th Congressional District.
Thank you so much, Alicia, for that kind introduction, and good afternoon to all of you. I'm Congressman Dan Goldman, as Alicia mentioned, from New York's 10th District, which is Lower Manhattan and Western Brooklyn. Finishing up my first term now in Congress, and have been really eager and excited to dive into so much of what the Inflation Reduction Act and the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act have to offer. I first want to thank the Alliance for Clean Energy New York for the opportunity to address all of you today. And I'm going to focus today on a few of the fundamental truths about the clean energy transition and the crucial role that you all in this room have in guiding the future of our state and our nation as we build the infrastructure to convert from oil and gas to renewable energy. Now, as everyone knows in this room, the Biden administration and Democrats in Congress passed a historic legislation 2 years ago to provide incentive subsidies and tax credits to encourage companies to invest in clean energy. And recently, in my district, Equinor, a Norwegian oil and gas company, broke ground on a $1 billion offshore wind project, Empire Wind 1, that will serve as the largest offshore wind staging and maintenance port in the nation, and ultimately will connect the wind farm's clean energy capacity to more than 500,000 homes across New York City. This will be the first offshore wind project to plug directly into the New York City grid, and I am determined that it won't be the last anchored in my district. It's very important to note that Equinor has made it very clear that the only way that that project could get off the ground was because of the subsidies and credits in the Inflation Reduction Act. And I've heard the same from many others in the clean energy space. But I'll be honest, this project simply took too long to break ground. 7 years from inception to groundbreaking. That is not sustainable as an economic model, and that lag time will not allow us to meet our ambitious clean energy goals, both in this state and on the federal level. An example of these problems is that Equinor has acquired a second larger lease for another offshore wind project, but has paused that project in part because of the difficulty of getting this first one off the ground. And we know the issues that the New York 3 solicitation had that ultimately rendered several projects having to be canceled. Now, to be sure, this is a nascent industry, and there are always bumps in the road for any innovative technology, especially one as transformative and complex as offshore wind. This is not just putting turbines in the ocean, and no, they don't kill whales, but it's the transmission infrastructure and technology to get this energy on the grid at a competitive price and in an efficient way. And there's no question that all parties involved, from private industry to every level of government, will learn a lot from these initial projects and be able to both streamline future projects and make them much more viable. But I want to be clear, the success of this industry depends on every level of government committing to cut red tape, to expedite the permitting and licensing process so that clean energy can be both profitable and viable. Governor Hochul and the City of New York, notwithstanding some of the adversity, have demonstrated a serious commitment to making New York the center of the clean energy revolution. And I'm grateful to work with both of them in making this happen. But make no mistake, clean energy is the future of the American economy. And we in New York have to make sure that New York is the epicenter of that future. Now, we're coming up on a crucial election in 7 weeks. You may have heard something about it. I know you won't be surprised that I have very strong opinions about the outcome for many, many reasons. But one thing that jumps out to me about Donald Trump and his Project 2025 is that he has threatened to eliminate the words climate change from all federal regulation and has promised to roll back all of the clean energy subsidies included in the Inflation Reduction Act. As we all know, that would set us back decades. We simply cannot allow that to happen. But luckily, it's not just me and my fellow Democrats who are the only ones concerned about this possibility. In fact, there are my colleagues on the other side of the aisle and at all levels of government that have begun to recognize not only the imperative of clean energy, but also the opportunity. I came to Congress with a determination to be creative, to be aggressive, and to find pragmatic solutions to the problems facing our country. And although you may think it's crazy, I see an opportunity for bipartisan cooperation in renewable energy. Now, there's no doubt that a central reason why those who don't believe that climate change is a hoax, which of course is nearly every scientist and every rationally thinking person, see the climate benefits in transitioning from oil and gas to clean energy. Those reasons are set forth in a couple of different ways. There are economic reasons, national security reasons, and geopolitical benefits to clean energy that are appealing in both Democrats and Republicans alike. And so while I, as a Democrat, those of us in this room, other Democrats, see the value to our environment in clean energy, there are reasons separate and apart from that why Republicans are incentivized to get on board. One, I often hear my Republican colleagues talk about energy independence. What better way to achieve energy independence than to make our own energy here? That way, we don't have to rely on a global oil market driven by foreign adversaries, which dramatically complicates our geopolitical relationships and compromises our national security. Under the status quo, the United States relies on foreign nations for energy production to keep pace with American demand. From 1958 to 2018, we were a net energy importer. And even though President Biden has actually overseen the most energy independence of any president in modern history, oil prices are still susceptible to the whims of OPEC and our adversaries. But even more importantly, this industry will create tens of thousands of good-paying, often unionized jobs. According to an estimate from NYSERDA, the state of New York will need about 10,000 offshore wind workers in the next few years, and with those jobs having an average salary of $100,000 per year. Name me a politician who does not like creating jobs for their constituents. So in the coming years, the global clean energy transition is going to be the largest capital formation, perhaps in human history. And here in America, the economic benefits and job growth provided by President Biden's climate initiatives are not just limited to traditionally blue states. In fact, it's quite the opposite. Consider this. States with Republican leadership account for 57% of all U.S. battery cell manufacturing capacity, 59% of all solar cell and module production, 95% of all hydrogen production capacity, and 83% of all carbon capture capacity in the United States. And Republicans know this. Just last month, 18 of my colleagues in the House on the Republican side wrote a letter to Speaker Mike Johnson asking him to preserve IRA's clean energy tax credits because they argued those investments, and I'm quoting here, spurred innovation, incentivized investment, and created good jobs. Georgia's Republican Governor Brian Kemp has said that he will advocate for companies that have brought jobs to the state regardless of who is sitting in the White House next year. And even the South Carolina's Republican governor said that electric vehicle manufacturers and other car companies have been flocking to South Carolina for years, and they will continue to do so long after President Biden leaves office. Now, this is a highly competitive field, and the United States, of course, is not the only nation looking to advance and benefit from the clean energy revolution. In fact, most of the current offshore wind projects in the United States are investments by European oil and gas companies who have already recognized the economic case for investing in clean energy. But even more concerning is China's aggressive focus on this space. As historic and significant as the Inflation Reduction Act was, China has more than tripled that investment in clean energy. Global demand for renewables will continue to grow, and we simply cannot allow ourselves to fall behind. The United States can and must win the race in technological development. This is critical for both economic and geopolitical reasons. American clean energy investments in developing nations can guarantee the strategic imperative of protecting American interests and supporting our allies in the face of rising authoritarianism. Our competitors and adversaries have already realized this opportunity. China, in addition to their tax credits for internal development, have drastically increased investments into clean energy projects across Africa and have pledged another $51 billion in additional investments. Even Saudi Arabia has identified the promise of renewable energy, establishing a goal of increasing electricity generation from renewable sources to around 50% by 2030. This is the heart of the oil industry. Now, where I'm really going to catch you off guard is I do truly see a bipartisan future for clean energy, where it's not just the European oil and gas companies that recognize this opportunity, but American oil and gas companies too. In order for that to happen, we need our government at every level to lay the foundation and create the infrastructure to make green energy financially appealing. We aren't there yet, but we can continue to work on it. And I can assure you that when the American oil and gas companies start to realize the promise of clean energy and start to invest in it, my Republican colleagues will follow behind. And this is where we all need to work together. Our environmental protection laws are incredibly important, but I'm sure I'm not the only one who sees some irony in the fact that environmental reviews significantly slow down perhaps the greatest environmental protection innovation in our history. We need to get smart and creative about ensuring that we are adhering to the law while rethinking the processes that can force a project to take as much as a decade to break ground. That is simply untenable, especially because costs of projects change and increase dramatically over 7 to 10 years, which is part of the reason that some of the recent projects have had to be canceled. And the stakes right now are simply too high to delay. We sit at the crossroads of history. We face a climate crisis that threatens the very future of our planet. We face autocratic adversaries rushing to supplant American democratic leadership on the global stage. We face a rising cost of living and rising cost of energy, and American families are struggling to choose between their paying for energy or putting food on the table. And these are big challenges, and the stakes are high. But this is why I ran for Congress, to find solutions and get results, to accomplish big things. We have all the brilliant minds and intrepid entrepreneurs that we need to tackle these problems, just sitting right here in this room. So keep the faith. We know there will be bumps in the road. There have been bumps in the road. But we not only can make the United States the center of the green energy revolution, we can make New York State the center of that revolution in this country. I look forward to partnering with all of you to come up with those creative ideas of streamlining the process, making sure that we have the necessary transmission, the necessary storage, the necessary grids to take advantage of the most incredible sources of power available. And I've never been more optimistic about New York's future and the United States' future as the energy capital of the world. Thank you very much, and let's get to work.